Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CRISC Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Reviewing controls for effectiveness and maturity is a critical part of risk governance. Controls are the organization's front line for risk treatment, and understanding how well they perform goes far beyond asking whether they exist. A control may be in place, but unless it functions reliably and is supported over time, it does not reduce risk in a meaningful or sustainable way. Risk professionals help determine whether controls are working as intended and whether they are mature enough to continue performing through changes in staff, systems, or threats. Governance bodies depend on these insights to make informed decisions about risk posture and treatment planning. On the exam, terms like untested, ad hoc, or ineffective signal a control that may be present but is not delivering the intended protection. The strongest answers are those that reflect structured evaluation and connect control assessments to risk assurance. The concepts of control effectiveness and control maturity must be clearly distinguished. Effectiveness asks a simple question: does the control work? In other words, is it performing its defined function as expected, consistently, and under the right conditions? Maturity goes deeper. It assesses how well the control is managed, whether it is documented, whether it scales, and whether it improves over time. The control can be effective but immature. Perhaps it works, but only because a single knowledgeable employee is keeping it going. If that person leaves, the control could fail. CRISC candidates must understand that control assurance requires evaluating both function and structure. On the exam, many scenarios hinge on this distinction. If a control is working now but lacks documentation or automation, it may still be a long-term risk. The best answers reflect both real-time effectiveness and ongoing sustainability. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. A comprehensive effectiveness review draws from several data sources. Control test results, whether passed or failed, provide immediate evidence of operational performance. Key control indicators offer trend insights, showing whether failures are increasing, whether test coverage is slipping, or whether exception volumes are rising. Audit findings and compliance assessments can also highlight issues, especially if a control fails to meet regulatory standards or internal benchmarks. Correlation with incidents, or lack thereof, also matters. A control that consistently aligns with reduced incidents is likely working. One surrounded by frequent breaches may be failing silently. Input from control operators or end users adds qualitative insight. Do people trust the control, find it usable, or regularly bypass it? CRISC professionals bring all these inputs together to build a well-rounded picture. On the exam, if a scenario lacks supporting evidence, the correct answer often involves collecting or reviewing these effectiveness signals. Maturity is often assessed using structured models. Common maturity frameworks define 5 levels: ad hoc, repeatable, defined, managed, and optimized. At the ad hoc level, the control may exist but lacks structure. Responses are reactive and inconsistent. A repeatable control has some pattern but lacks documentation or centralized tracking. Defined controls are documented, standardized, and part of training or onboarding. Managed controls are measured, performance is tracked, failures are logged, and trends are reviewed. Optimized controls are continuously improved, automated where possible, and linked to performance incentives or advanced analytics. CRISC professionals use these models to determine where controls stand and where improvement is needed. External frameworks like COBIT, ISO, or NIST can be used as benchmarks. On the exam, questions about maturity often ask what a level indicates: structure, sustainability, or continuous improvement. Correct answers reflect progression and governance integration. Control documentation and lifecycle management are essential for both effectiveness and maturity. A control without up-to-date documentation is a warning sign. CRISC professionals review whether the control is documented, who owns and maintains the documentation, and whether updates occur after changes. Controls that are integrated into onboarding, refresher training, and audit cycles are more likely to be sustained. If a control is not embedded into any of these processes, it may work today but fail tomorrow. Controls, without visibility, meaning they're not included in regular reporting, testing, or planning, are at risk of slow degradation. On the exam, when audit failures occur due to missing documentation, the correct response involves strengthening lifecycle visibility and control record keeping. Mature controls are embedded into processes, not dependent on individuals. CRISC professionals assess whether controls are part of standard operating procedures, whether they scale with the organization, and whether they can adapt to changing systems or threats. Controls that must be manually adjusted or are tied to specific people or systems are fragile. Resilience is a key aspect of maturity. A mature control can survive turnover, function during outages, and evolve in response to new risk inputs. Maturity does not mean perfection, it means consistency, traceability, and adaptability. On the exam, if a control fails due to staff change, missed update, or lack of flexibility, the root issue is usually low maturity. The best answers highlight structure, integration, and long-term resilience. Assessment results must be communicated through governance reporting channels. Risk committees, internal audit teams, and process owners need visibility into which controls are functioning, which are weak, and which require redesign or retirement. CRISC professionals use dashboards, scorecards, and heat maps to present this information visually. Critical controls with low effectiveness or maturity must be highlighted and linked to specific risks in the register. Governance teams use this data to prioritize remediation resources, evaluate risk acceptance decisions, and update treatment plans. On the exam, governance failure is often tied to poor communication of control issues. The correct answer includes targeted reporting and transparency around both functional and structural control performance. Control assessments are not a passive exercise. The insights gained must feed back into risk management practices. If a control is effective but lacks maturity, CRISC professionals may recommend process documentation, owner training, or automation. If a control fails during testing, it may need to be redesigned, retired, or supplemented with compensating controls. All of these outcomes must be reflected in the risk register, linked to updated residual risk scores and adjusted treatment plans. Future testing plans must include at-risk controls, and KPIs and KCIs may need to be revised. On the exam, the next step after identifying a weak control is never note it and move on. The best answers include concrete improvement actions tied to governance processes. Control assessment records must be audit-ready. CRISC professionals ensure that all assessments include the assessment date, method used, reviewer names, test results, and follow-up actions. These records support both internal oversight and external audits. They also serve as reference material during change management, incident response, or compliance reviews. Assessment findings should be linked to change requests, policy updates, and residual risk adjustments. If documentation is missing or incomplete, governance visibility weakens. On the exam, a common clue is audit failed due to undocumented control review. The correct response is always to implement structured, recorded assessments with traceability and governance review. CRISC exam questions about control reviews often focus on what maturity means, what effectiveness requires, and how governance should respond. You may be asked what a given maturity level indicates, and the correct answer will relate to structure, oversight, or resilience. You might be asked why a control degraded over time. The answer is likely poor maintenance or ad hoc operation. When asked what's missing from an effectiveness review, the best answers involve test results, performance metrics, or clear ownership. If a scenario includes assessment results, you may be asked how to use them, and the right answer will involve updating the register, informing treatment plans, or reporting to governance. The strongest answers always reflect structured evaluation, documentation, lifecycle management, and governance linkage. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber CRISC Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.